You know, it's not a mess though.
Ah, do tell.
Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. That game,
Nice.
holy shit,
That
what a
game
game.
came. I don't want to say left field because I know it was on my radar because of I can't remember you so much. Maybe bad me. I know Darren was very excited for this game. Um,
I
for
think,
yeah.
go for it.
No, I was just gonna say I know one of the characters is voiced by Ben Starr. Good
Hmm.
Paul. Good guy Ben Paul. Ben Starr. And there was a comparison at some stage. I could be misremembering this, but some thing, I don't know if it's the game director, somebody saying like Final Fantasy VIII is their favorite game, and
I think it's 10.
I think Dan was like, yes, I'm
I
locked
think
in.
it's 10. Like, Final Fantasy 10 is a big inspiration to this game, apparently.
Why do I think it was
It's
eight?
spoken it. It, I know Ben Starr loves
I
Final
know he
Fantasy.
loves eight, but why do I
Yeah.
think? I'll look it up while you tell me about this game.
I think it's
Um,
definitely 10. I remember hearing
no,
it
no,
quite
not
recently, actually, but
not the actual combat, but I think there was something about like the game director also saying like Final Fantasy VIII is their
oh,
favorite Final Fantasy, and Darren was like, "Yes, I'm locked in. This is the game I'm going to play now."
yeah,
Anyways, that
maybe.
is a whole sidebar.
Um, I mean, this game popped into my radar. So firstly, it's not Microsoft published, which is kind of odd. I always thought it was, but it turns out it's just on Game Pass, and that's why it got so much press as well.
Yeah,
Very smart, because as soon as I saw this game and its very Persona-ass menus for its
you're
turn-based
like,
combat, I was
yes,
completely in, just from that perspective. But it turns out there's a lot more going on than just like turn-based combat with a great UI. So it is one of the most interesting and active turn-based combat systems I've ever played. And I think a lot of people can be quite reductive and be like, "Oh, this is just like the Mario and Luigi games, the Mario RPGs where it's like you're turn-based, but you can press like keys or for quick time events with
yeah,
certain timing to do more damage or whatever." And yes, that is true. I do think it is a much deeper system than what's present in the Mario games. So
yeah,
firstly, you play with a party of characters that all have different affinities and abilities.
yeah,
They each have a sort of like gimmick to them. So, for example, Gustav, who's like your main protagonist, he has this ability called Overcharge, which, depending on the number of charges you've stacked up, does more damage. And you gain charges by doing basic attacks. Any hits on an enemy basically give you a charge. So attacks that do like 3 hits in a turn give you three. On top of that, if you dodge or parry attacks, you also add to this charge. So you can pretty much get this thing going within like 2 turns with like a maximum of 10 charges and do like a
mm,
mad amount of damage. Um, that's his sort of like thing. Then you've got Mael, who has a whole different, much more complicated gimmick to her. So she essentially does attacks and can change between 3 stances. So doing a certain or using a certain ability at the end of it, she'll be put into, say, an offensive stance, which
mm.
lets her do 50% more damage, but also means she takes 50%
Thanks.
more
Yeah,
damage. And then another attack will put her into a defensive stance, which reduces damage and also gives you more AP points when you dodge or parry. And you're
mm.
kind of like each turn kind of going, okay, I want to do this attack, but I know the next turn I want to do this more powerful attack. So I want to end my current turn in an offensive stance and take a risk on potentially taking more damage before that happens, but then doing more
Mm.
damage when I get there, stuff like that. Um, and you're kind of chaining together things like you've got Luna, who is a mage and she does all sorts of elemental damages, but she stacks like certain spells will give her these sort of like glyphs. So doing a fire spell will give her a like red glyph, and then other abilities will be like, oh, it consumes red glyphs to do more damage, or
Yeah,
consumes 2 blue glyphs to do this effect. Like I think one of hers is like if you do this ability, I can't remember which one it is, and you've got 2 blue glyphs, then you can take your turn immediately again afterwards. And you
okay,
can kind of chain together things where, like, oh, if an enemy is burning and you're using Mael, if you do this attack and the enemy is burning, then you'll actually go into this third very, very hectic stance, which lets you do like 200% damage. And if you do this ability while in that stance, then you can actually stay in the stance for an extended period of time. There's all these synergies between the characters in your party where you can chain up some really interesting combos, but at the same time, you're facing enemies who all have a variety of different defenses and resistances, and so you're constantly having to rethink in what order you're going to engage them in and how you're going to synergize between your party members. You're not just trying to exploit an elemental weakness. You're actually trying to see how you can best set everyone up to do a big chain of damage in a single turn.
Yeah.
So that's a really big. I think it's really cool because it's not your standard like RPG classes. You kind of have to work between the lines of all these characters and their specific combat abilities. But then on top of it, you have this active element where every attack sort of has these quick time events where you can hit. It's actually just one button, but you hit it with certain timing and you do more damage. That is sort of like pretty basic. The more engaging part is when you're on the defensive. So this game feels almost like Sekiro in a way, where you have a dodge and you have a parry, and the windows are obviously bigger on a dodge and very, very tight on a parry. And so you can parry any attack that an enemy puts onto you, but they all come in with very odd timing. So they do the Dark Souls thing of doing a very slow swing, a very slow build up, and then like immediately like punishing you on a fast attack. And you kind of have to figure out the timings of different attacks and identify which attacks are coming your way so that you can effectively parry them. And if you parry all the attacks in a certain string, you'll do a very powerful counter attack on enemies. Some enemies actually like require you to do that. They won't take traditional damage. They only get exposed if you kind of do parry damage to them, which is kind of neat. But then you've got enemies that like mix things up where you can parry certain attacks and then they'll do like a jump attack, which you then need to press jump to avoid. And then press like a trigger button while you're in the air to actively counterattack them. It's just this really cool melody of it feels like Sekiro, where it feels like a rhythm game to an extent. You're looking at attacks, you're timing your parries because they do come with a certain rhythm to them. And you know, it means you can do like complete no-hit runs on certain battles because if you parry everything, you just don't take damage.
Nice.
And it just feels so good. It's been tuned to like perfection in my opinion. Battles feel very dynamic because like you're constantly learning new enemy attack patterns, and then you're working out how to synergize between your characters to take, you know, the best action during your turns. And it feels like the game wants you to engage with combat as well, because you played Metaphor, Refantasio, and a lot of RPGs of this ilk. You're kind of limited to your exploration of dungeons based on how much mana you have. Because at least in Metaphor, and this is the same for most Persona games, as soon as you are kind of like tapped out on mana, you have to leave the dungeon and come back a new day. Expedition 33 doesn't have a mana system like at all. It's just AP points, so action points while you're in combat, and when you're out of combat, the only thing you need to manage is your health. And your health is replenished as you reach each kind of like new. It's like a bonfire in Dark Souls. You get to a bonfire, you rest up, you get all your charges back on your healing flasks, and you heal up everyone in your party, and all the enemies around you reappear. They like repopulate and reproc. So it is incentivizing you to just get into combat as much as possible rather than like managing this resource and choosing your battles and coming back to fights another day. And it's kind of refreshing. And I think this game's just like really, really good from that perspective. The story is also quite interesting. It's set in a sort of, I don't know, it's set in France, although they don't call it France. It is very French. It's got an Eiffel Tower and all the characters speak French. So, but you're basically stuck in this loop where there's this character called the Paintress, and every year, I think, she paints a number on this like island out in the distance. It's like a number that decreases by one every year. And when she paints that number, everyone of that age dies, like immediately.
Oh, hectic.
It's very, very hectic. It's quite, the opening's quite sad because you basically see parents with their children, and their children know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to lose their parents on this day, and there's these whole agencies which are like ready to take in these orphans essentially every year
Oh,
and
hectic.
have people mentor. It's hectic. It's like when you think about it as a concept, it's like it's quite a like if you were living in that sort of scenario, it's rough. And the
Yeah.
fact that it's getting younger and younger every year, it's you can see fate coming at you a lot quicker than it should, you know. And so every year they send out expeditions of basically people who will die in the next year to try and see if they can stop this cycle, like try and figure out how to stop this. And so you're part of Expedition 33 because you are now it's 30 the year that's been painted is 33. So your characters are basically going to die within the next year.
Fuck, that's
And
you.
they've
Aren't
been
you 33?
well, yeah, I mean, well, you're 32, you're gonna turn 33.
Okay.
Oh no, you're talking about me. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
be
you.
dead. Yeah, and I just turn into
Good one.
ash, and that would be it.
Nice.
It's kind of cool because you pick up these journals from past expeditions. So it will be like Expedition 68 or Expedition 50, and you can piece together like the more expeditions go out, the more they're learning, the further along they're getting.
Yeah.
But they still don't know how to stop the cycle, and so you're sent on this essentially a suicide mission because you have no idea if you're going to succeed or if you're coming back. And the whole goal is to just discover as much as you can, leave it for the people who come after. It's a phrase that they utter a lot, is like they are doing what they're doing so that others can live on. They know that they are kind of a lost cause, and it's good. I think the acting is really good. The story premise is very, very interesting. And it balances like these very like tragic and sad moments with some moments of levity as well. It's just really, really well balanced, and the voice acting is phenomenal. I mean, you said you've got Ben Starr there, but you've also got Andy Serkis. You've got Charlie Cox, who is Daredevil in the Disney series. Just all around the cast is really good, and it's just as a complete package, a really, really solid game. It is far and away my favorite game I've played this year, and I'm just itching always to get back to it.
Yeah,
so
I've
put in like
very keen to
15
start.
hours. It's
Nice.
like 15, and apparently it's like 30 to 40 hours. It's not like super long. So yeah, I'm having a great time, and I think when you get around to it, you're gonna immediately pick up on what I'm saying. It's
when
good.
I can find it, like now that I'm back and settled this week, and when I'm not playing not new games, I've got this on my list. Definitely, I've got it downloaded, ready to go. Because this, I think I'll thoroughly enjoy a game like this. I mean, just to go back to earlier, so I wasn't. It wasn't a fever dream. So on the wiki page, according to the producer Francois Marie, the game drew inspiration from Squaresoft's Final Fantasy 8, 9, and 10 in particular, while the dodge and parry mechanics were influenced by From Software's Sekiro. Say no more.
Oh, so actually they do mention Sekiro. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's interesting. I didn't know that they had actually mentioned that. It felt very Sekiro-like. So
yeah.
Okay.
There's something. Darren can correct me, but I don't know how far the Final Fantasy 8's influence goes. But I know Final Fantasy 8 had I think it was unique to most Final Fantasies, where I think if you attacked a Squall, the main character, if you pushed like R1 or something at a specific time, he did more damage.
Interesting.
And it was funny because back then it was like it's a simple thing, but it's a very engaging thing as opposed to you just hitting like, training an attack command, as you like trying to prompt this active more damage thing every time. So I wonder if, I mean, that's like a very basic example, but I wonder if they looked at that like how do we expand this and, take turn-based combat, make it even more engaging by including all these other layers on top of it. And from what you've described to me, it sounds like what they've done is very clever. And I think what's really cool to see is that this game surprised a lot of people. Like, I think people, I was expecting it in like the 80 territory. Like, it looked good. I was like, yeah, it's going to be like a pretty good game. I was not expecting it to be like one of the highest scoring games of the year.
Yeah, no, I same. I
So,
mean,
yeah.
looking at it, pre-release, I was like, I think I'm gonna vibe with this game.
Yeah.
It's got the flair of a Persona, and it looks like it's got an interesting premise, and it looks really cool visually. I did not expect, within the first hour to be like, oh, this is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Personally, just so surprising in that it wasn't entirely what I was expecting it to be, but in the best way possible. And yeah, it's really cool to be surprised by that, because I feel like that doesn't happen too often anymore, where a game can completely like sweep you off your feet in a way that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, for the studio, for this to be their first game, it's just unbelievable. And I honestly cannot wait to see where they go from
Yeah,
here.
what do they do next? Yeah.
It's just, yeah, I don't know how you follow up something this phenomenal. There's something really cool that I think you would quite like, because I've seen a lot of people say this is sort of how Final Fantasy used to approach open worlds. But so each level you're in is quite linear. It's like almost like a hub, where you definitely have like a critical path, but you can take little avenues here or there to find certain
Yeah.
resources, optional battles or stuff like that. I do wish there was a mini map, because some of it becomes a bit confusing, but that's a very small criticism. But when you're out of these hubs, you're exploring like the overworld and moving from one hub to the next. And it's almost like your characters are giants in a bigger open world. So you are actively moving between these two. You're exploring the space. It's very limited, but you're covering a lot of distance in a very short amount of time. And then
Okay.
getting to a hub, and it's like shrinking down into a forest or a
Yeah.
ravine, and then you're down there. And I think a lot of people say it reminds them of the airship in Final Fantasy 10, I think it is,
Which one?
or
So you
even
broke up there.
even 7.
Uh,
Final Fantasy 10 or 7.
uh,
It's kind of how they approach their open world design.
yeah. I don't know. I know. I can't remember Final Fantasy 10, but I know all Final Fantasy 1 through 9, you come to a point where you get an airship and you can go anywhere you want in the overworld. So I wonder.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that. You do get a airship equivalent here eventually, but it's just kind of cool, because it's not trying to be a massive open world with, I think, a lot of superfluous guff in between. It's just like,
Yeah.
no, this is a neat little thing you can do to get between the major points in the game. And
Yeah.
I saw some people saying they wish Final Fantasy VII Rebirth kind of did something like this, as opposed to what it did.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I think that's why this game is like a 30-40 hour thing as opposed to an 80-hour thing, and I think
Yeah.
it might be better off for it.
Well, I mean, just before we bounce off, it's worth remembering the early Final Fantasies. I mean, like, let's just say the original Final Fantasy VII for comparison's sake. That whole game from beginning to end, if you just like did a bit of exploration, but mostly mainline, that was like 20 to 30 hours. It wasn't particularly long, and it is this thing because you are, like you've said, you navigating this huge globe, but it obviously does this thing of it makes you feel like you're traveling these huge distances, but like very quickly. So it's clever. I think it's very clever design. I mean, to speed things up, and not speed things up, that's the wrong term, to not make this like an 80-hour affair when it doesn't need to be. If it's just this tight, I mean, calling a 30-hour game tight is hilarious, but for an RPG that is very tight, it's like actually kind of short.
I completely agree, and I think that's why this is like surprised me so much, is because it doesn't waste time to get to the things that are fun about it. It's not for a game that's introducing a whole new premise and this whole new world. It kind of does it in a very elegant and very fast way. It doesn't feel like they're skipping over anything, but at the same time, not drowning you with 5 hours of exposition. These characters are talking about the events they're experiencing in a very natural way, in a way that doesn't make it seem like, oh, this character is just saying this stuff so that I understand it. And I think, not to get on this whole thing again about Final Fantasy Rebirth, because like I know I didn't enjoy it as much as you and most people, but I do think it is an example of where RPGs have gone and they're just like they've been stretched out for the sake of being stretched out. And I think Expedition 33 is a reversal of that trend. And yes, it's because it's a much smaller studio. It's priced actually accordingly. It's only a $50 game. I didn't know that. And so, again, it's just like this idea of quantity equates to value. And I think, if this game was a full price $60, $70 game, I'd be just as happy with it because it is, from a quality standpoint, up there with some of the best role-playing games I've ever played. So, yeah, I don't know how I go back to a turn-based system that doesn't allow for this active element anymore. Like I was thinking about playing Metaphor again, and I was like, wow, that just seems so static by comparison now. Which is hilarious because last year I was raving about how Metaphor was a new era for turn-based combat. So, for this team to come out here and do this is just incredible.
Yeah, I think just on Metaphor, that to me, I mean, I haven't played Expedition 33 yet, but Metaphor, I remember playing it at the time, thinking this is like, they've taken all the elements of all the best JRPGs and just made it into one package. So I think we'll have to see what happens. Like, will Atlas look at this kind of game and go like, this is how we should tackle the next Persona or whatever. But I do think Metaphor still stands as like a benchmark of turn-based in terms of like, I'm going to call it like classic turn-based, because I don't know if we'll go back to that. Like maybe studios are going to look at this and go like, holy shit, we need to follow this. Like this is this is what happens in gaming. It'll be like one small thing. You're now living through it, and we'll never really notice that, actually this small change has become like the staple for all games that follow. It's like such a simple, obvious thing. So it's like, of course, add like a parry system, but it took somebody actually doing it in a turn-based game for people to go like, how do I go back to what came before this? It's crazy.
I do think we're living in a sort of like golden age of that, where you have so many different ways for turn-based combat. Like if you just look at the current landscape, like you said, you've got Metaphor, which is, I agree, it's the peak of that formula. It's, mana management. It's, you've got your classic classes that all do different elemental damage. It is the peak design of that thing, especially with the way it manages turns and half turns. Very cool. Then you've got Final Fantasy Rebirth and Remake, which go in the complete opposite direction, where they still have the classic feel, but it is super active. It is like it's skirting the line of a action RPG, which Final Fantasy 16 went well into that direction, but it's got that turn-based feel to it, despite being completely real time. And then I think you've got Clair Obscur here, which threads the needle in the middle, where still turn-based, you're still taking turns, but it's got this active element to it, which makes it feel more reactive and dynamic. And I don't think there has to be just one. I think all three can exist, and all three can be phenomenal in their own right, and I think they will be. And I think it's just such a treat that you can have role-playing games with such variety, where if you go back even just 10 years, everything was either character action or completely static turn-based. So I'm excited to see what other studios learn from this, because I do think you'll start seeing elements bleed into one another, and that's just cool, I think, for people like us who are fans of this style of game. Well, we are living through a really good time for these games.
Final Fantasy 17, does it keep the action based of 16, or does it take inspiration from the 7 remake? Does it look
I
at
definitely
this,
think they're going to claw back some of the role playing, because I mean there was a lot of backlash from the core community over how far removed 16 was from actual role playing. I enjoyed it.
I loved it. Not a role playing game by any stretch of the imagination.
It's a great game, but it is not a role-playing game. No question. I think they'll probably go back to something more in line with a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Final Fantasy 13 even. And who knows, they could take inspiration from those. I think it's 17 that goes back to turn-based, but learns to be a bit more dynamic with it would be fucking
Very
awesome.
good, yeah.
I think it would be like, cool, this is the classic Final Fantasy feeling, but with a twist, you know what I mean? Oh, I think it would be, and you know, Square pushed in this direction of more active combat because they were of the opinion that people don't like turn-based RPGs anymore. You know, they
Wrong.
actively did that during development, and you know, 16 didn't sell nearly as well as they wanted to. You've got Metaphor Refantasio just showing them up, you know, in a way that they thought was not possible. And now you've got Clair Obscur, which, you know, sales-wise, I don't know how it's doing, but the sort of conversation around it is massive. So I think Square could definitely look at this and go, cool, we made a mistake. Let's reevaluate. And I think that would be the best course for Final Fantasy in the future.
Well, I think there was it news this week? Clair Obscur has sold over 1 million copies, like aside from its Game Pass numbers, which is massive for like a small.
In like 3 days, yeah.
Small. I don't know how big the studio is, but it's not a AAA studio. Like that's huge. So
no, and
good
they
for
even
them.
had
The old
President
Macron.
mention it. It reminded me a lot of how Poland was so proud of CD Projekt Red.
The Witcher,
that they gave, I think it was
Obama.
Barack Obama at the time, a copy of The Witcher 3 or The Witcher 2 as a gift when he was visiting. Like, that's cool, man.
What the hell?
Yeah. He's like, oh, I love Geralt. Such a cool guy.
Yeah, it would have been
now
nice if you looked at them and I was like, actually, I'm a huge Witcher fan. Thank you. Like, I had no idea.
It's cool. It's cool when a studio pops up like this and is like the pride of a nation because, you know, I do wonder what Arcane is feeling like because they're like, hey, we've been in Lyon, France for fucking ever. Where's our mention from President Macron?
Going on? Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad this game stuck the landing because it had a lot of expectation going in, but for it to even exceed that expectation is just,
I can't wait to play
great.
it.
I can't wait for you to play it because I think you're going to completely take to it.
Yeah. Even me.
Good. Yeah. Oh, just as a last thing, that soundtrack, phenomenal. It's
awesome.
Orchestral. It's beautiful. The whole thing is on Spotify. It's 7 hours long. It is just so good. So good. I've listened to it so often and it's top tier. Yeah.
Nice.
Great time.
Say no more.